Nobody ever talks about why the schools of psychology are important, what they have to teach to us that is practically relevant, how they can transform our behavior. This is a guide for those who want to understand psychology to do exactly that. The first school is behaviorism. This school is primarily based on training, how reward and punishment make your behavior more or less likely to happen once again. That is why the first lesson is don't practice what you don't want to become. Whenever you're doing any action, you're training yourself to do it more often. You're rewarding yourself, and thus you will do it more often. If you drink or if you smoke, then that means that every time that you do that, you are rewarding yourself, that it becomes more likely that you will do it once again. It is very pleasureful, I guess, and that is why you don't want to practice it a lot. Just as you don't want to reward something that is not conducive to your health, you want to reward it when someone you love does something that you like. That is why the second lesson is reinforce it when someone you love does something you like. If anybody around you ever does something that you like, that you want them to do more of, you might appreciate it, you might compliment them for it, and that means that they are more likely to do it in the future. And that doesn't have to be manipulative. If it is, then that means you're very smart, just like me. But you can even do it when it is actually advantageous to both of you. You can compliment them when they do something well for their own lives, and this way you can make it so that they are more likely to repeat behavior that is advantageous to you and to them. The third lesson then is to be careful what you punish and be careful what you reinforce. Similar to the first rule, you don't want to punish something that you want to happen more often. You don't want to reinforce something that you want to happen less often. This is because anything that you punish happens less often, and anything that you reinforce happens more often. You don't want to use that against what you actually want to see in the world. This brings us to the fourth lesson. Punish yourself for easy behaviors you don't want to repeat. Reward yourself for tough behaviors you want to. This way, you can influence your behavior by using reward and punishment. You can make it so that you exercise more often. You can make it so that you challenge yourself more often. You can make it so that you press snooze in the morning less often. You can change your behavior and influence it in ways that you wouldn't have been able to without this. The fifth lesson then is to don't let bullies get away with it. This is not just about bullies either. This is about anything that is a negative form of behavior that you don't want to condone. Don't let people get away with blackmailing you, for example. Don't let your child get away with being very stubborn, for example. Because if you let that happen, then that means that it will continue to happen. You are not punishing a behavior that you are supposed to punish, and that means that it will continue to happen forever in the future until you learn your lesson. Another crucial part of behaviorism is exposure therapy. This is often used to deal with phobias, to deal with paranoid fears of anything. And that brings us to the sixth lesson. Expose yourself to things you are afraid of that you don't want to be. Think of what scares you and make yourself encounter it in a bearable but uncomfortable situation. If you make that harder and harder every time, then that means that eventually you will be able to make your fear go away. Another important thing that behaviorism talks about is social learning, learning by imitation, and that is what brings us to our seventh lesson. Imitate those who are better than you at something. If you want to learn anything from someone who is better than you, then you want to imitate them. You want to look at them and see what they are doing differently from yourself. If you can notice that, if you can observe that, then that means that you can learn from them, that you can become more like them, more like the part of them that is better than you. That brings us to the second school, which is psychoanalysis. This school emphasizes the role of the unconscious a lot more than any other school. It views the individual as a collection of different subpersonalities. This school of psychology gives a lot more significance to the unconscious, to the parts of you that you are not conscious of. It views the individual as a collection of subpersonalities, as a collection of many people almost. Each subpersonality then is striving for one thing over another, and the dynamics between those different subpersonalities is what leads you to act the way that you do. Different subpersonalities within yourself want different things, and when their opinions clash, what happens is that you are set in a dilemma. You are supposed to work, you're supposed to complete your school homework, but you want to watch this video, for example, and now you're in a dilemma. You want to do one thing, but you also want to do another, and those two subpersonalities are conflicting with each other. And the solution of that conflict is what brings us to the first lesson, which is to negotiate with yourself. You cannot always make it that one subpersonality wins and the other loses. You often have to make it so that there is a negotiation, there is a sacrifice that both personalities have to make, both drives have to make, so that you can come to a conclusion that is best for both parties. And that brings us to the second lesson, which is don't grow subpersonalities you don't want to have. You don't particularly want to grow the subpersonality that likes to smoke too much, right? That brings us back to behaviorism and not practicing what you don't want to become. And when you practice something that you don't want to become, you grow the subpersonality that you don't want to grow. And that's that. Psychoanalysis also led to the introduction of free association. This was where psychologists would have their clients talk about anything that bothered them. Whatever came to mind, they were supposed to say it, and that is how the psychologist dealt with the problem. And that is what brings us to the second lesson, which is to write down what bothers you. This way, you can talk about what is actually the problem, and maybe if the problem isn't there at all, but you're seeing something there, you can deal with it. If there is something there that actually has to be dealt with, then you can formulate a plan of action. If there is nothing there, then great, then you don't have anything to deal with at all. But if you don't write it down, you will often not even know what you are thinking about. Your mind will just jump from one place to another. The fourth or the 11th lesson, I guess, is recognize unconscious patterns. Psychoanalysis also talks about the different issues that we have in our lives and how we often tend to repeat the mistakes that we have made in our past because of unconscious patterns, unconscious belief systems. This way, we make the same mistakes again and again, and we continue it all our lives until we understand what the problem is, we understand what we are doing wrong. And once you begin to see what you have been doing wrong for a very long time, you can fix that. So ask yourself, what have you been doing wrong for a very long time that you still are doing wrong, and maybe an answer will come to mind. The next one is to deal with unexpressed emotions before they deal with you. A great quote from Freud, who was one of the creators of this school, was, "Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in unclear ways." This means that problems that you don't deal with, emotions that you don't deal with, still exist. They exist inside of your unconscious. And if you don't control them, if you don't deal with them, then eventually they will come out, they will erupt, and they will overwhelm you. If you don't deal with them today, they will deal with you tomorrow, whatever that means. That brings us to lesson number 13, which I have found actually very helpful. This is also related to free association, and the lesson is rant into a notebook to deal with muddled internal dialogue. When you write down what is bothering you, when you write down or even say to someone what is concerning you, then that means that it's gone. Usually that what happens is that there is a problem that you are trying to deal with, and if you write it down, then that means that you can deal with it better, and you should try it as well. The 14th lesson is to detach from the great father. A very interesting thing that Freud said was that nobody could become a man unless his father had died, and Jung, one of his disciples, later said that yes, but the death can take place symbolically as well. And what that is talking about is that when we are children, we associate our parents with the great father, the society, everything that protects us. And as we come to become individuals, what we see is that they are individuals just like us, and they are finite just like us. Then that is one of the things that you have to sacrifice when you grow up. Your father is no longer something that can protect you from everything. He is, in many cases, just as clueless as you are. And once you realize that, you begin to connect with the father as opposed to the image of the great father. And that's that for psychoanalysis. The third school is cognitivism. This has to do a lot more with how we learn, what is going on inside our brain, what is happening when we are thinking, and how it can influence our general lives. The first lesson is learn more about things that interest you. Basically, the school believes that as long as you are learning, as long as you are progressing towards something that you want to know more about, and you are progressing towards that, then you are increasing your abilities, and you should try to do that as often as possible. The second lesson is connect new information to what you already know. Whenever you're trying to learn, what you will find out is that you're learning what you know is arranged in mental maps and conceptual models of the world. So the different things that you know are connected to each other in different mental maps, and you don't see the mental maps, but they are inside your brain. And if you are learning anything new and you connect it to something that you already know, something that you are already aware of, if you are very good at chess and you make a chess metaphor, for example, for something new that you are learning, then you are more likely to retain what you learned because of that, because you are connecting it to something that you already know. The third lesson is make your goals explicit. A very interesting thing that I've come across recently is that all behavior is goal directed. Any behavior that you commit, you're having a goal and you're working towards it. And that means that everything that we do every day is based on implicit goals. The goal of getting a job, getting a degree, finishing school, finishing college. And if we can make those goals explicit, then that means that we can edit them. We can see what is wrong with them, what could be better, what could change about them, how they might be malleable so that they can better apply to our specific situation. And if you can make your goals explicit, then that means that you have a lot more options to do with them what you want to. The 18th lesson is conduct learning through feedback. Another important thing here is that all learning is feedback. Everything that you learn, you're learning through feedback. What you do wrong is punished, what you do right is reinforced, just like with behaviorism. All learning that happens to us happens through feedback. We try to achieve a specific goal and we try many different things to do that. And the one course of behavior that actually works out is now rewarded, and that means that we will do more of that from now on. And that means that we are gaining feedback as to what happens when we do one specific course of action. Whenever you're trying to learn something, think about what you did wrong, what you did right, how you are doing it differently from how more skilled people to it. And then you can come to almost conduct this phenomenon of feedback artificially so that it happens even more. The next lesson is to simulate mistakes to learn from them. An interesting experiment I came across recently highlights this very, very well. A group of basketball players are divided into two, and the first group is made to do hoops every day for a few weeks, and the other group is made to imagine doing a few hoops every day for a few weeks. The first group has an improvement by 24%, which is obvious because they practiced so much, and the other group had an improvement by 23%, which is insane because they were not actually playing basketball. They were just simulating mistakes, they were simulating what is actually going on in the behavior of doing a few hoops. By simulating what you are supposed to do, you can come to learn a great part of what you would by actually doing that behavior. A very good example of this is the next lesson, which is to resolve negative memories when they come up. Whenever a memory from more than 6 months back comes back to you and it comes back with a negative emotion, with cringe, embarrassment, sadness, anger, whatever, then that means that there is something about that memory that needs to be reconciled. There is something that you did wrong in that situation that you now need to reconcile. What I do in these situations is to think of a one sentence line that would highlight what I did wrong in that specific situation. For example, a line might be careful doing things that might harm you, or a line might be careful making stupid jokes. Whenever you think of a memory that is associated with negative emotion, what that means is that you made a mistake in that specific situation and you don't know what you did wrong. And if you can think of a one sentence liner that will highlight what you did wrong that you don't want to do once again, then that means that you are less likely to do that once again. And not only that, you will also forget the memory eventually, about a week after that. The next lesson is to learn by forming a hierarchy of laws. Whenever you're trying to learn something, there is a hierarchy of laws that is involved in that. You're thinking of different laws, and some laws are more important than other ones. Think of boxing. You're not supposed to put your guard down, right? Because somebody will hit you. But you're allowed to put your guard down when you're punching the other person. And little by little, there is a more and more complex hierarchy of laws being formed. And if you act that out, then you're a good boxer. And if you don't act that out, then you're going to get beaten up. The next school is depth psychology. This school is similar to psychoanalysis, but it is in many ways a lot more deeper, as is clear in the name. This school understands the unconscious through different parts of the unconscious, through the shadow, the anima, and the animus, and they present themselves to you in different situations across your conscious normal life. For example, the shadow is a part of you that is representative of all those instincts of yours that have been suppressed during childhood, violent instincts, aggressive instincts, and whenever you are overcome by rage, what happens is that the shadow possesses you, it overwhelms you, it controls you, and that is what you see when people around you are completely possessed by their shadow. And that is why the first lesson is to recognize evil around yourself. When you begin to see the evil that is present in others around you, your loved ones, and even yourself, what will happen is that you will recognize that there is a part of you that is very, very dangerous, and it is not only other people that are evil, it can be you as well in some situations. And the next logical step from that is to integrate your shadow into your personality. That means that it cannot overwhelm you anymore, and that is lesson 2. Integrate your monstrosity. When you begin to integrate your shadow, you recognize that you are a dangerous person, you are a force to contend with. And if you have controlled your shadow, if you have integrated it into your personality, then that means it can no longer overwhelm you. You can control it and you can challenge it in any way that you want. Two other significant parts of this school are the self and the persona. The persona is the mask that you take on whenever you adopt any responsibility. The persona is you as a student, you as a father, you as a mother, you as a parent, a child, anything. And that means that anybody who has taken on the persona of student is going to act in a very, very similar manner. And the self is what is consistent about yourself across different years. So the self is something that is consistent in you at year 1 and at year 90, and across all of that it is your complete potential to actualize yourself. And the self is the real part of your identity, it is the real part of what you can be, and the persona is a fake artificial representation of you. And that is why the third lesson is identify with the self, not the persona. When you begin to do that, you see yourself as a different person, you see yourself for who you could be rather than just what you are. The next lesson is to understand your personal myth. According to this school of thought, there is a mythology, there is a story that we are all living by, but it is different for each of us, and if we can understand it, then we can even change it maybe. There is the story of the rebellious child, the story of the arrogant brat, there is the story of the benevolent mother, the protective father. By understanding your personal myth, what happens is that you understand what you are driven by. You can understand what you are trying to achieve, what you are motivated by, and maybe if that story, that mythology is not advantageous to your success, to what you want to achieve, then you can try to abandon it. You can better understand yourself by understanding the personal myth that you are living by. By paying attention to your thoughts, to your feelings, to your fantasies, to what motivates you, you can understand your personal myth, and that is exactly what the next lesson is. Pay attention to your thoughts, feelings, and fantasies. This means that it will lead you to better understand yourself, to better see what you are driven by, and that is a step toward understanding your personal myth. The next lesson is to make the unconscious conscious. A very good quote from Jung, who is the creator of this school of thought, was, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This has to do with recognizing unconscious patterns, which is what we were talking about before as well. And basically, if you try to look into your own psyche and understand yourself better, what will happen is that you will realize the unconscious patterns that you are living out in your life. And if you can see that, if you can see the personal myth that you have been living for too long that is not advantageous to you, then you can abandon it. Then you can adopt a different personal myth. The next one is a very interesting one as well. It is, ask yourself, what ideas have you? Are they advantageous? A great quote by Jung, who was the founder of the school, is, people don't have ideas have people. And that is because everybody who lives by any idea performs and acts in the world in a very similar manner. Anybody who lives by the ideas of the communist belief system or the feminist belief system acts in a very similar manner. And you can see it as if the ideas are transcendent principles that are above one individual human being. Even if you were not to exist, even if you were not to believe in those ideas, the ideas would still exist. And that is why he said that ideas have people and not the other way around. He also said that people were to ask themselves whether the ideas that have them are advantageous for them. So what you might ask yourself is whether the ideas that have you are advantageous for you. Is it advantageous for you to believe that everybody has human rights, or that it is better to improve yourself than to stay the person you are today? There might be many ideas that have you, and if you can analyze them, then you might understand why you act in the world in the way that you do. The next school is humanism. This school of psychology is a lot more focused on personal growth, on self-actualization, and on achieving your potential, achieving what you could be. The first lesson is, look for the carrot rather than running from the stick. Since we often tend to be motivated through punishment, since we often tend to be motivated by other people threatening to punish us if we don't do what we are supposed to do, we often just tend to run from the stick instead of running to the carrot. We don't act toward what could be better. Instead, we act away from what could be worse, what could be bad. We study because we would be punished. We could fail if we didn't study. We don't study because we could have good grades. That is just an example. And that also connects very well to the next lesson, which is, think of what you would like to be like and then aim at that. The point of this whole philosophy, this whole belief system, is to value what you could be more than what you are, to move toward your ideal self, to move toward what you could be rather than just staying the person that you are. Surely it would be better if you were a better person. Your life could be better. You could have more things. You could be happier, be better in any way that you might imagine. And that is what this philosophy, this school of psychology, focuses on. One way to do this is by accumulating small wins. This is something that many schools of psychology talk about. Basically, if you are trying to achieve something that is very big, very hard to achieve, then it will be very hard for you to do that. But if you set it up so that you only have to achieve many small things on the way to doing that, then it will be a lot easier for you. If you achieve one small thing and then one slightly bigger thing, then it will be a lot easier for you to achieve the big thing that you first aim to achieve. Every step that you take in a positive direction makes it more likely that you will take another one. But if you try to make it so that you have to take one huge step since the beginning, then that will be much harder for you to do. Another great lesson number 32, is be careful solving other people's problems. This is a rule that psychologists often live by. Psychologists are not supposed to advise their clients into solving the problems that they are faced by. That is because if you solve somebody else's problem and they are able to solve it because of your advice, then that means the problem was really solved by you and not by the client. You don't want to solve only the problem. You want to make it so that the client is worthy of solving the problem in the future. You want it so that they discover how to solve the problem by their own abilities. If you help them out and they are able to solve the problem, then that means that the next time they need to come to you once again to solve the problem. If you help them in figuring out the solution on their own, then that means that the next time they won't need you, and that is what you're really trying to do in the first place. Nearly always it is a better idea to help people solve their own problems rather than trying to solve their problems for them. The next lesson is, aim to improve something in your life every week. This also has to do with personal growth, with trying to go toward your ideal self. So every week you want to do something, you want to move toward the ideal self that you think you would like to be like. And if you are moving toward that every week, then you are actualizing your potential. The next lesson is set up systems that do your work for you. This has to do with the creation of habits. If you can make it so that many parts of your day are automatic and you are automatically achieving many of the goals that you have, that you want to do every day, then that means that it won't take any effort for you whatsoever. You don't want to use willpower when you're trying to achieve any goal. You want it so that the behavior that you have to do, exercise for example, is automatic and you do it every day anyway. You don't want it to be so that you have to use your willpower, because your willpower is a limited source of energy. You cannot use it all day every day. The next one is look for things around yourself that could be better. Challenge yourself to improve them, or at least not make them worse. As you look around yourself for problems that you want to solve, that you can solve, the magnitude of the problems that you can solve will progressively increase. The ease with which you can solve them will increase as well. Little by little, you can take steps towards a better future, and you can't know that yet, but there is nothing wrong with hoping. The next school is existentialism. As is in the name, this school has a lot more to do with existential problems. The meaning of life, why are we here, why is humanity here as a whole. And the way that it solves this problem is through the first lesson, which is meaning is to be created rather than found. Meaning is to be created rather than found. This means that the meaning of our life, whatever gives our lives meaning, is to be created by us rather than found. Life has no meaning by design, but whatever meaning that we have to find within it is to be found by our own selves. We have to take up responsibility, look at the things that call to us, and that is how meaning is to be found in our lives. This school also has a lot to do with responsibility, with taking responsibility for everything that you do, and that is what the second lesson is about. You are responsible for what you do and for what happens to you. The point of believing this second rule is that everything that happens to you is in your control. You can influence all of it. Even though it might not be true in every situation, if you believe that you are responsible for everything that you do and for everything that happens to you, then you are a lot more likely to try to do something about it. If there is no such thing as randomness, which there obviously is, but in your belief system there might not be for a certain amount of time, that would mean that you do a lot more to deal with the problems that are put in front of you, and you don't just attribute them to randomness. The third lesson from this school is to embrace your freedom. You cannot choose what happens to you, but you can choose what you do about it. This is obviously conflicting with the second rule, but both of these are to be used in conjunction. At some points in time, you believe the second one, and at some points in time, you believe the third one. Depending on the situation, you might use either of them. The next rule is to say yes to that which gives your life meaning. Whatever it is that when you're doing it, you forget about the passage of time, you forget about everything, and you're completely engrossed in that activity. That is where meaning is to be found, in creativity maybe. It could be anything for you. And what this school says is that if there is any such thing that makes you forget about mortality, makes you forget about the bad things about life, then you should pursue it and you should do more of it as much as possible. The next two lessons are pretty similar as well. The next rule is to look for the why that will help you bear anyhow. This comes from Nietzsche, who is a philosopher who said that a man with the why can bear anyhow. And if there is something in your life that makes it so that you can bear anyhow, then that means that that is the meaning of your life. And that connects very well to the next lesson, which is to pursue what calls to you. Your calling, or anything that you find meaningful that others wouldn't, is what you should pursue. It is seen in mythology as a sign from the divine. It is seen as something that calls to you, even though it wouldn't call to others in a similar way. And that means that any problem that bothers you, any field that interests, is a sign from the divine, at least in mythological terms, for you to pursue the meaning of your life. The last lesson from this school is to accept suffering. It is also seen in many religious belief systems that life is suffering, and that suffering and life are so intertwined that they cannot be separated from each other. And the point is that if you find meaning, if you find something in your life that is worth doing, that is worth all the suffering, then that means that you should pursue it. And that is the purpose of this school of psychology specifically. Whatever you choose to try to attain, money, status, whatever it is, eventually, as soon as you attain it, there will be something else that you want to attain. You cannot be satisfied that way, which is what is the basis of this school of psychology. That is why you need to find something that is intrinsically meaningful, intrinsically satisfying to you, and that will be your calling. That will be what is giving your life meaning. The next school is cybernetics. Calling it a school is kind of a pseudo truth, but I like this school, so I guess we'll call it that for this video. This school aims to understand the interaction of the individual and the environment through systems. One of these is the system of resolution, and that is the first lesson. Look at the highest resolution possible to solve the problem, but no higher than that. You can look at any situation at different levels of resolution. For example, you're watching this video. You're watching this video because you want to learn psychology. You want to learn psychology because you want to become a psychologist. You want to become a psychologist because you want to help people, for example. And this way, by watching the video, you're at the highest resolution. But as you go higher and higher, you're going lower and lower resolution. So the highest resolution would be what you are doing right now. A lower resolution would be what you are doing right now and why it is relevant for you next week. An even lower resolution would be why what you are doing right now is relevant to you next month. And this way, as you go higher and higher, what you will see is that your purpose, your goal is more and more broad, it is more and more vague, and there is more and more high resolution actions of yours that are based on it. So whenever something goes wrong, if you fail an exam, for example, what you want to have happen is that you look at the highest resolution possible to change the result that you want. If you failed the exam and you still want to get a college degree, for example, then you would change your studying technique. You wouldn't make it so that you drop out of college or you abandon the goal of getting a college degree in the first place. The next lesson is to adopt new ways of understanding your life. This high resolution and low resolution framework of viewing life is one of these. You need to notice the framework with which you are looking at life. Whenever you conduct any behavior, for example, you're trying to bring about a change in reality. Reality is in one way and you want to make it in another way, and by behaving in the specific way that that situation requires, you're changing reality from one way to another. In this behavior pattern, what is happening is that everything that is in your way, that is an obstacle, will cause you negative emotion. Everything that is a tool that helps you achieve that specific goal is a tool for you. That means that those things will cause you positive emotion. And when you see this, when you begin to understand that your goals, your behavior are fundamental to how you view life, then you will understand how this framework is crucial to perception even. The next lesson is to look at what you do every day that could be better. A majority of the things that we do every day are a major part of our lives. If we spend half an hour on something and we do it for 30 years, that is a huge amount. And if we can change it for the better, if we can improve it, then that means that our life will change for the better as well. And that is what a system change would require in this case. The next lesson is systematize your habits. By creating systems where you face problems, you can deal with them without having to use willpower, which is what we were talking about before as well. If you use your phone as soon as you get up in the morning, then maybe you keep your phone in the kitchen or something. By systematizing this means that you don't have to use your willpower. You don't have to exert your own effort in order to not do something. You can make it so that automatically you are supposed to do it. And that brings us to the next lesson, which is reset malfunctioning feedback loops. Whenever you find yourself in a situation where something is going wrong, and the fact that that thing is going wrong means that everything is worsening, you need to reset everything. For example, your night routine is all ruined, and because of that, you're sleeping half an hour later every day than you were the day before. And little by little, what happens is that now your night routine is all ruined, you cannot go to school, everything is haywire. In such situations, usually the best solution is just to reset the feedback loop. I can't tell you what that specifically means in your case, but I can tell you you need to reset the malfunctioning feedback loop. And the next one, which is very similar, is to start non functioning feedback loops. This is the case when you want to start something that might be good for you, you think. This is something that I like to do quite often. If there is something that I want to do, a new change in lifestyle, a new habit, a new thing that I want to try, and I haven't done it for a very, very long time, then I set a date on my calendar, and if I don't try that before that date, then I never can. That means that the feedback loop has to start. What I have decided that I want to try has to be tried, otherwise, I lose the opportunity forever. And usually it leads me to begin habits that are quite advantageous to me later on. The next lesson is to find out what you are wrong about. Usually, the case with our belief systems is that whatever we believe is what is confirmed to us by whatever we see. If we believe something, then whatever we see around us will confirm that belief for us. And if we don't seek out reasons why we might be wrong, we will never be disproven. We will never change our opinions. And if everybody believes something that is conflicting with everybody else, then the majority has to be wrong. And that means that we all must be wrong about one thing or the other. And if we can challenge ourselves to try to disprove what we already believe, then that means that we will make what we believe even stronger by that. Eventually, what we will believe will be the strongest case we can ever make for anything possibly. And well, that's all for that. That was too long a video that's all for that. I was not planning on that video being that extremely long, but it was fun. So I'll see you in the next one. Check out this video right here, and bye bye.